Right in front of me is a beautiful chestnut tree that's been here for over 10 years. And today my good friend Juan and I were eating mulberries from under this chestnut, which begs the question, creates the riddle, how do you harvest mulberries from a chestnut tree? The answer is actually really simple. Plant a mulberry right next to your chestnut tree. A bunch of years ago, I was doing a workshop deep in the winter. It was a very cold moment in December, and I was talking about things you can do in the winter months. And there happened to be a tiny little seedling mulberry right next to the main house. And I dug it up real quick with a hori, opened up a slit near this chestnut and stuck them in. This is to the east side of the chestnut tree. And over the last couple of years, 4 or 5 years, pretty quickly, this mulberry has wound its way up through the canopy and popped out above. And now it's raining down mulberries while we wait for chestnuts. Not a bad crop to find on your way to a nut harvest in the fall. I could imagine many people looking at this and saying, this guy's a fool. These plants are way too close to each other. You can't plant trees 6 feet apart and have it work. And that's a reasonable thing to say, but I want to get deeper. I want to go beyond just that idea. You can see the chestnut here on the west, the mulberry to the east, the mulberry loaded with young fruit, getting ready to drop. We can do a few things here. We can say, let's let these two trees just work it out over time. There's a lot of canopy opening. I'm looking to the north, and so all out here to the south, they can lean into that glade a bit over time and maybe completely compatibly live next to each other for a really long time. Both chestnut and mulberry are excellent quality firewood. They're also beautiful working wood for spoons and things like that. So we could selectively cut one of the two branches of the mulberry next winter to process into firewood and other things like that. We could also use a pole saw at peak harvest moment to cut a branch or two out and pick all that fruit on the ground, thereby giving a release to some light to the chestnut. We could also coppice the chestnut and or the mulberry on many year rotations. What I'm trying to get at is plants can be near one another and quite functional. You can make adjustments later on, but it's always better, in my humble opinion, to plant more plants in an area than a single plant in a sea of lawn. That same silly riddle can be applied here, where we've got a very beautiful, tall, towering chestnut just getting into peak flower. And I could say, well, how do you harvest apricots and pawpaws from a chestnut? And the same basic answer, pawpaw being a very shade understory tolerant being. They're here to the southwest, so they do get a little bit of nice late day sun, but they could be to the east, they could even be to the north of the chestnut, enjoying some of the shade. The chestnut could be pruned in such a way as to be a little bit more of a standard timber tree rather than a low sprawling tree if we needed more light to the pawpaw, but they're completely content. They're not leaning or having any issues. There's actually 3 pawpaws in there, so they will pollinate one another. And off to the edge here, leaning pretty hard because they don't love the amount of competition they're under, but they are surviving and they will make it, is a Siberian apricot. So pawpaws and apricots while you wait for chestnuts. There's some black currants that are even under that some more, and there's a hardy kiwi mischievously weaving their way through here. We cut them back every 2 years or so. This wild chaos has an American persimmon, 3 European hazelnuts, a Morpha fruticosa or river locust providing nitrogen and their shade tolerance being appropriate to the north of this whole thicket. And again, way too close, is it? I don't know. We can harvest hazelnuts for firewood or pole wood or for making fencing or sheep hurdles. We can harvest persimmon for baseball bats and other crazy things. It's some of the highest BTU firewood in the northern hemisphere. So there are pathways we can take in the future, but these plants have really complex interrelationships. At first glance, with any shot, when you look around the Edible Acres scene, to most eyes, it may look as though it's an abandoned property. Nothing's going on here. It's just wild insanity. And that is true, and it is also thoughtful and really functional. The more you can mimic the pattern of a wild space in nature, the more resilient overall, the more total yield you get. And you can be eating currants while you wait for your pecans. And you can be eating peaches while you wait for your pawpaws. And then pretty soon you're not waiting, you're constantly eating. It's way more fun this way, I think, if you can get over the hurdle of letting yourself move into more of a jungle than a curated farmscape. Every plant you see in front of you is a plant that I have a deep appreciation for. They're here for particular reasons. They are sculpted and adjusted a handful of times throughout the year, but they're also free to be feral in some ways too. And we see elderberries, we see persimmons, there's way more European hazels, there's a hybrid poplar, which is our emergency mulch as needed, and also bird habitat. Persimmons, there's plums, there's stinging nettle, there's valerian, there's red currant, there's autumn olive, there's more elderberry, there's horseradish, and a goji berry for some reason. Plants want to be near one another. Plants do not like isolation. They don't like social distancing, as it were, and they actually get along incredibly well, or way, way better than we give them credit for. And some competition, some pressure, moderated and adjusted periodically, seems to increase overall vibrancy and disease resistance we've observed. And the more we can mimic these wild patterns in nature, the more likely it is, with the more wilding of climate, that we're going to have at least many characters left when the dust settles. Thanks for watching.